Thank you all for joining us today in Connection Design Mentor Meetup for FIRE URM students and alumni. We are excited to have the opportunity to really talk about the power of connections. And so in today's conversation, we'll have three parts. We'll hear from two alum about their story of the power of connections, in addition to a Q&A led by our two wonderful students from MoCA and Flock. And then we'll continue the conversation to part two, where you will have an opportunity to connect with each other and hear from one of the alum in a breakout room process, as well as with a few students in that group to really have a conversation and continue what you've talked about and what you learned about in the open session, as well as learning more about the power of connections from another alum's perspective. And then the third way is really just socializing in a way that, if you've ever been in a space where you connected with others, having that opportunity to do so in a unique new way. And I'm excited to share what that is a little later. And so we will continue our journey forward and having the conversation. And so today our alumni panelists are Ernesto, who graduated in 2007, as well as Melissa, who graduated in 2009. Our co-facilitators will be led by Ebuka and Chukwudumebi from MoCA and Flock. And so they'll facilitate a conversation. But to start us off, we'll have a video presentation from Ernesto and Melissa. And we're gonna just go ahead and start with Ernesto's video presentation.
Welcome. My name is Ernesto Chanona. I'm an alumnus from School of Arts and Sciences, graduated in 2007 with my degree in biology. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey from the scientific bench to business, and how connections I made along the way helped me make that happen. The first step in my transition from academic science to the business world was when I started Googling networking events in the biotech industry. And the first thing that came up was Lifetime Achievement Gala. But much to my surprise, it was $500 per ticket to attend the event. And so I asked the Maryland Technology Council, hey, do you need any volunteers for the event? Maybe I could help. And they would allow me to attend the event that way. But at last, they didn't need anything. However, they did decide to comp me my ticket, and I went to the event. So lesson number one, always ask for help. At the event, I met this Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Ben Wu, who actually told me about another networking event, the Tech Transfer Summit, that was happening 2 days later. And so I decided to go. Which brought me to my second lesson. Talk to people you don't know. Making connections is all about having the strength and the courage to sometimes approach people at a networking event. When I went to register for the event that was happening at NIST, where the governor of Maryland gave an address, I was told that the registration was closed. But when I told them that I was invited by the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Ben Wu, they let me go. Name drop whenever you can, and whenever it's appropriate. That's where I met the Director of Life Sciences that worked at the Department of Commerce. After a series of interviews, I got that question that everyone's hoping for. What are your salary requirements? I didn't really know how to answer that question, so I went to the Office of Intramural Training and Education, and I asked my mentor, Sherry Milgram, what I need to do, and she told me that I needed to learn how to negotiate, and they gave me a crash course there. So remember to ask your mentors for advice, offer something for asking, talk to people that you don't know, and name drop whenever possible. Study for those interviews so that you actually get a job offer, and once you do, go back to your mentors again to help and get coached on negotiating for salaries and benefits for your next step forward. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Awesome sauce, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We will continue on and roll through. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat right now based off of what Ernesto has presented to us. And he also has put his LinkedIn page in the chat. So take advantage of that now and open it up, start the connection. But also we're going to continue on, and Melissa is going to share her tips and about the power of connection. And so I'll turn it over to you, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Clifton, I don't know if you got a chance to load my video, but I can present that if you'd like. I'm really bad at Zoom, so you probably don't want me to. But if not, I can just talk. I can talk through it and I can present my slides.
I gotcha. I have you here.
I'm agile.
Here we are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa
Good
Hadley.
audio.
I am a Hopkins alumna, Arts and Sciences class of 2009, and I'm here today to talk to you all about the power of connections. So I'll start off with a little about myself. I work in management consulting. I provide organizational strategy and transformation services to government clients. I'm originally from South Orange, New Jersey. I am a first-generation American. My parents are from the Caribbean, Trinidad and Jamaica to be specific. I'm a wife. I've been married for the last 4 years. I have 2 kids, CJ and Cairo. CJ is 3 and Cairo is 1. As you know, I graduated from Hopkins in 2009. I went on to earn a Master's of Public Health from NYU in 2011. That's where I met my husband. And while I was at Hopkins, I pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. For me, connections truly have transformed my life experience in so many spaces. Today, I'm just going to
We need your sound, Clifton.
As you know, life at Hopkins isn't easy. The expectations are very, very high, lots of demand on students. And so I struggled to find and maintain very close friends while I was there. I was fortunate to meet the gentleman you see in these photos, Fuad, the woman that you see hugging him in that first photo, and a whole host of other folks that over time really became a strong source of support for me. And so I included these photos because these people, although I've been out of school for the last 10 years, for the most part have maintained their presence in my life. And the person on the right in the camouflage, she actually just helped me refinance my mortgage. She graduated the year after me, or a year before me at Hopkins. The next story I wanted to tell is about my career journey. I moved to DC in 2014 with no job. Before I did that, the woman all the way on the right, who is my sorority sister, she's in the photo with my now husband. She gave me an opportunity to come work for her at NYU, where she was the chief financial officer at the Wagner School for Public Service, and really helped me figure out what I wanted and needed to do to advance my career. The lessons that she taught me have helped me figure out that I wanted to be in management consulting, helped me earn a job at Grant Thornton. And the folks you see in the middle are 3 partners at the firm who have really invested in my growth and development. And just by being intentional about, forming relationships with them, I've been able to really catapult my career over the last 6 years. The last thing I wanted to share was about life at home and the power of connections in your personal lives. The last year has been really challenging. And if not for my friends that I've had since grade school, these are pictures of us at prom and in college. This would have been a really challenging time. And so the importance of personal connections, long-lasting personal connections, I think have really run true this year, given the unusual circumstances we are all facing. So before I wrap up, I just wanted to share this quote from Brene Brown. Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. A lot of us struggle with networking and forming genuine relationships because they require so much vulnerability and authenticity. And the courageous thing to do is to show up for other folks. Let your intentions be known, be clear about who you are and what you want from the world. And your relationships will yield you so much return on your investment. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the group has.
All right, so I will transition to Ebuka and Dumebi to facilitate Q&A.
Hi, my name is Dumebi. Before we begin the Q&A, I just want to thank our alumni, Ernesto and Melissa, for the tips that you guys shared. I just want to know, how do you think that identity plays a part in making connections, since that's a really big thing in your lives?
Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, I can go first. I think that when I was a student at Hopkins, my mindset was so closely tied to my identity that I actually allowed it to sort of limit who I connected with and how many connections I made. I think that identity is important in understanding who you are, when you understand who you are, you're able to show up more authentically with folks that you interact with and as you build relationships professionally and personally. I also think that some of us get so attached to our identity that we feel like we can only make friends who look a certain way, sound a certain way, have a certain background, and that's not true. Some of the folks who have helped me the most in my life and career, people that don't look like me, have never been to where my parents are from, who some say really bad things about New Jersey. I think that the value that I get from those relationships is that they bring me diversity of thought and perspective, and that is what ultimately enriches my life. And so I think that, the identity piece goes both ways in terms of being a strength and also maybe sometimes an inhibitor.
Yeah, I'm gonna add on to what Melissa just said, and how identity can actually be sometimes detrimental to trying to make connections. I think that the more tags you know about someone, whether it's their race or their gender or their background or their political views, like there's always something that's going to trigger perhaps something in you, and it's okay for that to happen, because we're all humans. We all have these filters. It's just a matter of being aware of what they are. What causes you to perhaps have a negative impression of somebody? It has a lot to do with your experience, with your background. You're taught some things that perhaps you shouldn't have been, some biases, some prejudices. And it is what it is. It's really hard to change those things. But when they surface, just be aware of that filter. And it's like, you know what? I know myself. I know that I'm judging this person, and I shouldn't be judging them in this way. I sit on the board of SACNA, the Society for the Advancement of Hispanics and Native Americans in Science, the DC chapter, and one of my board members was really upset that the former executive director was a former Republican staffer who was in campaign contribution and campaign financing, and the way they're in, white guy, former Republican perhaps, and leading like a Hispanic organization. And so of course, like half the people were up in arms about that, as you can imagine. But he was brought in because he knew how to fundraise, and the organization was going to go bankrupt. And it's a classic example of how to remind my fellow board members, you can't see him through this eye of like a white Republican guy. You have to kind of meet him as a person, and don't let these tags and these filters distract you and start getting all these emotions all mixed in, because that is not what matters. What matters is we need someone who can fundraise to save the organization, which is in financial peril. And so, so something to think about as you move forward with making connections with people.
Those are excellent points. Thank you. I want to open it real quick to the audience. If the audience has any questions for Melissa or Ernesto. If not, then another question that kind of plays off the previous one is, can you talk about how identities you used? Can you talk about the identities you used in making connections? Like, were there any specific identities that you kind of utilized when you were kind of connecting with people?
Yeah, that's actually a good one, Ebuka, and I was going to bring that up. I thought about that. So as I mentioned, I moved here to DC with no job in 2014. And so I just started stalking people on LinkedIn who I thought were like, had some sort of, so I had something in common with, or I could have a conversation with, to like have informational interviews and figure out how I could learn more about new opportunities, get referrals, things like that. I definitely, if I'm being honest, I definitely use my sorority. A lot of my sorors helped and continue to help me professionally. The other thing, though, the other identities, I was definitely more comfortable reaching out to people that looked like me, blindly. So definitely reach out to a lot of Black women. But once I got the job, I was working at Grant. Well, let me tell you this one story. The person that helped me get the job at Grant Thornton was someone that I met at the DMV. We were standing in line, and I don't know if you've ever been to DMV in DC, but like, it's not necessarily always the most efficient place. So we were standing in a line that was wrapped around the corner outside. And so you have nothing else to do but to talk to the people around you about how terrible it is. Started talking to this guy, like very skinny white guy from Kentucky, actually, but claimed Indiana. And he mentioned that he was working for Grant Thornton. And I was like, oh, I've been like tracking them, interested in working there. And he was like, oh, text me your resume. I'll upload it right now. So we're in the line doing nothing else. So I just sent him the resume, connected him to LinkedIn, didn't think anything would come of it. Lo and behold, a few weeks later, I was interviewing at Grant Thornton. A few weeks after that, got a job offer for more money than I'd ever made in my entire life. And that one meeting was completely transformed my life. And so I think if I were as close to being open and honest with people, especially people who didn't look like me, I would have never had that opportunity. Now that I work for Grant Thornton, a lot of my mentors and sponsors, they don't look like me, mostly because there are not a lot of senior people who look like me, period. So I've had to learn how to sort of step outside of my comfort zone. And I think that process has been very, very enriching to me, both personally and professionally. So sorry if that was a mouthful. I hope that was a helpful answer.
Yes, thank you.
I try to, when in terms of identity, I've met a lot of friends, that like to wear, for example, I have gay guy friends, they're friends of my husband and myself, and and there's a lot of our friends who love to wear like their sexual orientation as like that is they're all encompassing thing, and they just love living like a very pride life, which is great. But I'm a little bit different. I think that because I'm such a complex person and I have so many different interests, and like any one of these things, whether I'm a scientist or that I'm Hispanic or that I'm gay or whatever, like, I mean, I just don't let any one of those things kind of take over and overpower who I am, because first and foremost, I'm just a human. And so I think the first part of navigating kind of my identity was not caring what other people thought. I can't stress how toxic I have found social media in my experience. I closed my Facebook ages ago. I closed my Instagram ages ago. Like, I'm basically on nothing. Twitter is just, if you want to really get angry, you can go on Twitter. Because I felt that a lot of these outlets was about, you know, judge me. And it's like, I don't give what anybody thinks about me. My friends who know who I am, and Facebook happened to ruin the word friend for everybody, unfortunately. So you know who your friends are, and for real, and those are the people that really mattered, you know, and whose opinions you will seek whenever you need advice. And so navigate. So it's important to know who you are, be proud of that, no, and not let kind of these perceptions of how people are judging you get in the way of that. And then, you know, you'll find that because there's no hang up, people won't actually, they're, especially in terms of career development, they're there to learn about what skills you bring to the table, what journey your career wants, you know, what journey you want for your career, what is it that you want to do and like to do. Their main question about whether they're going to hire you is really, can you be a good part of my team? Do you work with the culture of where I work? Because we want somebody to kind of who fits our team's dynamic. And then all sorts of like, and who you are and all these different facets that make up your identity really don't matter at the end of the day, because it's about your skills and your goals and your ambitions.
Can I add one thing to that? Identity at work and professional settings is an evolving, the expectations are evolving rapidly right now. I think that when I first transitioned from nonprofit to consulting 6 years ago, my husband gave me a book by someone named Mike Heider, which I forget the name of the book, but essentially it was saying like you had to whitewash yourself in order to be accepted in the workplace. And that's just objectively not true anymore. It's an old book from, you know, older, by Fabian, an old book from someone who came up in a different time. I think now we're seeing a radical shift in like what's considered normal professional in the workplace. And that being said, I think that there is something to be said about like identity and how we approach professional relationships, things that maybe we would keep to ourselves or be uncomfortable bringing forth before, just for the sake of trying to just be like that standard, you know, black and white professional. I think we're allowed to be a little bit more authentic. We're allowed to bring more of ourselves to the workplace, to professional spaces. And in that same breath, I do want to say that it's still not completely like open, right? Like there are some things that we can't do, bring, project in the workplace, unfortunately. I think I was like a eager millennial that was like, oh, we're changing how everything is and we're gonna, you know, everything's gonna be like equal and great. And that's not true. And so I've recently just become acutely aware of that and trying to be more honest with myself and with others about how identity really does impact your experience, professional experience. And I think when we're more honest about that, I think that that enables us to sort of move the needle forward little by little. I hope that made sense what I was trying to say.
I completely agree with that, actually, Melissa. I mean, it's almost like if you think of everything that your identity is made up of, and it's behind a door, in some work, so as soon as like your first day, like that door is like completely shut, and you're like, like I need to feel this place out. Like how much of myself and what parts of myself can I kind of like let peek through, and to whom? So to your boss and to my boss, I'm a little bit more formal in the way that I am, and I'm very businesslike. So it's just pretty cordial and polite, but I'm not going to joke around necessarily, because that's just not her style. And I can read her well enough to understand that probably wouldn't go over very well if I was like 100% Ernesto. So I have to be, or 100% casual Ernesto. I have to be like 100% formal Ernesto. But with a lot of my colleagues that I've gotten to know, that's when I can be like 95% casual me, because it's just, you build that rapport, and you know who to be comfortable with in the workplace, and who to be more reserved with in the workplace, right? But in terms of making connections with people, I mean, especially like corporate America and business, it's all about the network that you make. Parts of your identity will come through in order to establish that trust with somebody. So like the way that I would approach perhaps a Hispanic colleague that I don't know might be a little bit different because I'm Hispanic and I can bring something to the table, some way of connecting on that level, and that's just kind of like a perk of that piece of your identity that you have, in order to establish trust with somebody. Other times it has nothing to do with my identity, but it has a lot to do with my hobbies. I'm a huge board game nerd. And if I happen to come across somebody who's also a huge board game nerd, that's part of my identity, not necessarily anything genetic, but like, it's just another way that I can establish at least a foundation for a professional relationship, which is how you get moving and how you start navigating your way through your career.
Can I ask a question to the group?
Of course.
What are some things that you all are doing to like build and foster relationships amongst yourselves given the pandemic? And I think y'all are totally virtual, right? And I'm assuming many of you all are still home, not all in Baltimore. So like, what are you guys doing to build and maintain relationships amongst yourselves?
I can mention an example. I don't know if I cut someone off, sorry. But for me, I think, staying involved with clubs has been really great. And also kind of like taking advantage of every opportunity to join sessions like this, because occasionally I see a face that I haven't seen in a while. Like I saw Ebuka and I haven't talked to Ebuka in forever. So I shot him a little private message like, hey, we should catch up later. So just taking advantage of the sessions that are set up has been really helpful for me.
Awesome. I see joining clubs, class group chats, like, oh, y'all have like text message group chats. That's awesome.
Yeah, I want to, if I can elaborate a little bit. Yeah. I'd also have to agree with what was just said. Definitely joining clubs, even if you're not, and we're not all together, but like we still have these sort of like intimate Zoom calls where like you get to know how people are doing. We do like check-ins, like with Flock specifically, because I'm also with Dumebi a part of Flock. We have like check-ins with our meetings. We also talk like as the e-board together, we talk amongst ourselves, make sure we're all doing okay. So it's nice to be able to to learn from the upperclassmen, as well as, connecting with our own peers through clubs and through group chats and just like kind of what was said, like any opportunity possible. It can be a little awkward, and it definitely is awkward a lot of times, but they have been fulfilling, and like I don't feel as alone as I thought I would at the beginning of the semester.
That's awesome, Sierra.
There's actually a question from the chat, and it says, questions to panelists. Can you talk about how your choice about how much of your identity you want to reveal plays into your choices on your career path / employer, etc.?
Sure, I can go first quickly, Ernesto. I think that my identity played a lot in, it's not possible for it to not play a role in those decisions, right? Because your identity is like a sum of like your experiences, what you've been taught, what you've seen, what you believe about yourself. And so those things obviously influence decisions you make, especially about how you want to spend your life. So when I was at Hopkins, I was pre-med. I thought I wanted to be a doctor because I also lived through 9/11 and I wanted to do something that was like objectively valuable. So that's like a whole set of trauma that doesn't make sense now, but at the time I thought I need to do a job that I can do no matter what. I also was a member of HOPE. I don't know if that exists anymore, the Hopkins Organization for Pre-Med Education. I was the vice president and then president of that organization. And then all of those experiences sort of, I don't know if y'all can hear my toddler screaming in the background. I'll get him shortly. But all of that sort of helped shape my decision to study public health. And eventually I realized that I was making all of these decisions, not because I genuinely had an interest in medicine or public health, but because I thought that my identity required me to do that sort of work. And so I had to force myself to step away from that and do the work to sort of figure out like what was really true to like who I was outside of my race, outside of my gender, outside of, you know, living through 9/11 and other things. Who was I, like, as Ernesto was saying, when you strip out all of those identifiers? And that's when I landed on consulting, and the best decision I've made of my life. So I hope that's helpful. I'm gonna take off my camera and go get my little guy. Be right back.
And I find that fascinating because so early on in my Hopkins career, I came out, you know, and at Hopkins, and then I quickly pivoted to this whole mental, like I shifted to not really caring too much about what other people thought of me. And it was an incredibly liberating thing. Because like I said, we are just very multifaceted. We have so many pieces and parts of us that make up our identity that I was like, I'm just me. I'm just Ernesto, and this is the complete package. And I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I'm gonna make friends and choose friends based on you know who I jive with, because I'm just being myself, and that's it. And so in terms of how much my identity has played in the choices for my career path and my employer, hardly any. Because by the time I finished my PhD, I was so kind of over any qualms. Of course I did see, like any gay guy that grew up in the 90s, there was a little bit of therapy there, needless to say. But after I got over myself, basically, then it was more about do I like the work? As it turns out, I really didn't like lab work, and so being a cancer immunologist only got me so far. The work was not making me happy, and I guess that's my identity as a scientist, if you will, that was not quite fitting into just my day-to-day happiness with the job. So when I went to network with, and I met the Department of Commerce, really with the aim of getting a job in Baltimore in the biotech industry here. It was more about me wanting to join the industry, me wanting to pivot to business and do something different. they happened to offer me a job, which was very serendipitous. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And when as soon as I explored what that meant, talking to people, being in a people-facing role, not in a laboratory, mouse-facing role, it sounded really exciting to me, and it was a really good decision. And actually, economic development really fit my personal strengths and what I wanted to do. And the fact that I was joining a pretty undiverse Republican administration didn't faze me in the least. They're like, they hired me. This is me. I mean, like, I'm here to do this job, and I'm here to do it exceptionally well because I think that I'm really going to like it, and I do. And it's worked out. And it's worked out. I mean, and I'm out to most of my colleagues. No one's ever cared. And if they have cared, they haven't said anything to my face about it. So hope that made sense.
Yeah, thank you. I see you have a question, Manny. Just for the sake of time, if you don't mind holding on to it for the next two sessions, there'll be a chance for you to kind of meet the alumni and get to ask them by yourself. But we'll move on to the next part where we go into breakout rooms. I'll pass it off to Clifton if he wants to kind of explain.
I have to jump off, you guys. It was wonderful meeting you. My LinkedIn is right there, and Clifton will share my information with you. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure meeting everybody.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.